Welcome, everybody. I am Troy Schneider. I'm the Senior Director of Imaging Strategy at Medidata, and we have something really exciting and different for Medidata Next. And I know, like a lot of you, I wish we were in New York. This is always such a great event. We're happy to be with you, though, virtually. And so today I'm joined by David Lopez from Abbott Structural Heart. And what we're going to be doing is something, again, a little different. We're going to be talking about the commercial side of bringing a device to market. So after everybody who's used to working on clinical trials and protocols and data management and clinical operations and enrollment, once you've worked really hard to prove the safety and efficiency of these drugs and devices, then what happens? And that's what David's going to shine some light on. So I'm really excited he's joining us. We're going to talk about really how Abbott and David's team has worked really hard to utilize technology to really boost pre-surgical collaboration. And so David and his team are responsible with bringing a really novel device to market, which is Abbott's MitraClip. And it really helps solve mitral valve disease. And so we're going to be learning a lot from David, how they utilize tools like Medidata software to help plan and collaborate with surgeons and cath labs and hospitals and imaging centers and even referring physicians for better patient outcomes. And so it's really cool to see the other house. We spend so much time focused on our clinical trial world that to talk about a novel device that's making a difference now across the globe, I think is going to be really fascinating and something a little different for Next that Medidata is a part of. So I think what's really important for us to note is when David and teams are out in the field or in the operating room, and really how the game is operated now is looking at the amount of data that's coming to medical device companies and to clinical specialists and medical device reps in the field every day. And we're used in the R&D world to talking about this data, but on the commercial side, there's a lot we can do in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, looking at analytics and algorithms on what does this data mean? How can we potentially find patients that aren't being served properly or potentially low performing sites or high performing surgeons? There's a lot of data, and really making this data understandable and making it accessible to the right people at the right time is vital for patient care. And so when we're talking about a medical device industry and how they prep for these complex procedures, they have to deal with things like imaging data. So we're talking about how are we able to get echocardiograms and CTs that are often more than a gig in size? How do we get those from imaging centers and hospitals and PACS systems to clinical specialists at Abbott and to surgeons where remotely, whether they're at their kid's soccer game, at home or at the hospital or traveling, where they can weigh in on what's the best plan of approach and is this patient a candidate for this procedure? So you have imaging data, tons of it. You also have EMR data. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, learning all the different fields, forms, different EMR vendors, being able to correlate your imaging data with your EMR data. And then we have new sets of data, like robotic telemetry data or surgeon performance, looking at trends also that we've seen in COVID light in terms of telemedicine. So we're starting to see more and more video data. What are we learning from patients from, say, their range of motion or their hand or eye movement? What else are we picking up from some of their verbal cues in terms of treating? That can start to be combined with imaging data and EMR data to really get a holistic picture of what we're seeing from patients. And then finally, we also have source data, which is also sitting at the site. So we're talking about handwritten notes from physicians or from physician assistants or exports from claim systems or EMR systems. Point is, you have data everywhere, tremendous amount of data. And for teams at Abbott and other medical device companies trying to make sense of this data and make it fit for purpose so they can best treat their patients in a near real-time manner is really tricky to do. And so the big question is, kind of most importantly, is how do we bring all this data together and make it meaningful for the advancement of patient care? I think we've seen the engineering side of medical devices come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years. We're doing things we never thought we'd do before. The next step of that is how do we do that potentially remotely? And how do we collaborate using all this data and technology to treat more patients in rural settings and to really bring subject subject matter expertise into that operating room every single time. And that's something we're really focused on at Medidata and partnering with groups like Abbott. I think it's important when talking about how do we access this data and using technology when we can't go on site to look at really the world of the medical device industry through the COVID lens. McKinsey did actually a fascinating report that I'd encourage everyone to go look at, looking at really the halt in elective procedures. We saw about a 60 to some reports 80% decline in procedures during kind of the March to July timeframe. McKinsey's been pretty clear, really, as we look to rebound, you're going to see a surge in cases. And some sites, though, are still really limiting who's coming in for face-to-face interactions and time in that operating room. And so really the medical device and pharmaceutical companies that really harness digital touch points to improve physician and patient engagement will be best suited to, grow market share, have better patient outcomes, and really increase site and physician satisfaction going into 2021. So using tools like telemedicine and the ability to look at documents and images remotely, and even look at an echo at the same time and collaborate and annotate on the best surgical approach, being able to do that from an iPad from home is going to be really, really crucial in this lens. And so when we start looking at being able to do all this remotely, we start looking at those tremendous amounts of data sets. And how can we do this on mobile device? Again, how can we look at a CT scan on a phone and send it to a colleague that's maybe more seasoned with this particular approach or this particular anatomy or revision? How can we get alerts from an EMR system when a new patient from a rural setting has a condition that we could potentially look at and help with? Same thing with our surgeon data and obviously our video data and source data. Being able to have all of this data at your fingertips and provide and be knowledgeable to your physician customers is really, really important. It's something the commercial side of a lot of medical device companies are really focused on. How can we leverage technology companies like Medidata and tools like artificial intelligence to really change this game? Instead of driving on site or flying to do these in person, how can we access all this data remotely and be better prepared for our cases? One of the tools we've had that Abbott has trusted in this space to power their mitral clippers is the Connected Patient Platform by Medidata. So this platform really looks at ingesting all the data you see on the left side. So we're able to leverage our connection at over 20,000 hospitals to basically set up the piping secure and compliantly to pull in things like hospital EMR data, and claims data, and lab data. And then also, just as importantly, the imaging data. So being able to reach within a hospital PACS system or straight off a modality in near real time, being able to pull off like a CT scan and an ultrasound and MRI, and then combine that. Open APIs at Medidata allow us to talk to groups like Salesforce or RCM systems, and be able to ingest that data and put it in a secure environment in the cloud where groups like David and his team are able to get notified when a new patient meets a certain criteria and be able to go in and have actionable insights and run analytics on what sites are growing or maybe what sites are seeing decrease in certain measurements or cases, and really look at this across the board on what their territory and device is doing in the market in terms of outcomes and market share. This tool is being used across the board by many medical device companies as things like 3D printing goes and custom device manufacturing, as we're going to talk to David about pre-surgical planning. So this is to me and a lot of people, this is a fascinating world. The medical device company has very talented and knowledgeable people in the operating room for all these complex procedures that are there to help and train and guide the physicians and the sites through some of the world's most complex cardiology procedures. And so the Connected Patient Power platform really helps David's team become prepared and knowledgeable and have everything at their fingertips when they walk in to talk to a surgeon and their team about upcoming cases. Being able to do that means that you need to be able to access remotely the images and EMR data and be able to share these cases with some of your colleagues. Maybe have a new hospital submit cases to Abbott using the Connected Patient Platform, and they can connect them with more experienced level 1 trauma centers that have been doing this for months or years. This also provides the ability to have real-time access, again, in case of an emergency, and the ability to do things more advanced in future state, like 3D rendering or using advanced viewing tools, or collaborating on the same image at the same time. Really important tools that really help guide the surgical procedures for Abbott. And so really, when we step back and look at this, I wanted to give you a little behind the scenes look at how Medidata is working with Abbott, and they're using our connected patient platform. We're really looking at both medical device companies and pharma companies possess a wealth of data. But will this data be clean? Will it be available? Will they have it at their fingertips? Will it be fit for purpose? So we really need to look at our data strategy, because again, these groups are touching a lot of data. Well, what's the best way for us to use this and make meaningful decisions? And then also, how do we look at this in sort of a COVID world? Our interactions and our bread and butter of doing everything face-to-face has completely stopped. So what technologies can we harness to keep patient care moving forward and our surgeons trained up? So it's just a really interesting time, and I'm really excited to be joined here to get his perspective by David Lopez. So David, I'll hand it over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself? And I know we're going to jump into some of the exciting work Abbott and your team is doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much. My name is David Lopez. I'm the account manager for Abbott Structural Heart. I am here in Tennessee, and I cover all of Tennessee. I have 2 clinical specialists underneath me, and we're very passionate about our product, transcatheter mitral valve repair. We are the only product right now that you are able to do transcatheter mitral valve repair with. So with that, we are very busy, and we have a very big geography we have to cover. Just a short video. We are on our 4th generation of MitraClip. This is our G4 system. It is transcatheter. All this is on top of the operating room, and it is sterile. It is a 24 French system. So 24 French is about 8 millimeters in diameter. It goes into your right femoral vein, going up from your inferior vena cava to the right atrium. In the right atrium, we go through one of the walls of the heart. We go through the septum, which connects the right atrium through the left atrium. Our catheters and wires are inserted into the left atrium. This is our dilator and our steerable guide catheter that is going into the left atrium on top of the mitral valve. Our clip delivery system is then inserted. Our clip delivery system, we have 4 different clip sizes to tailor our approach for the mitral valve. We're able to manipulate down the left atrium on top of the mitral valve. The red flow is the blood coming up from the ventricle. The blood is only supposed to flow down, not supposed to flow up. Once we position our clip on top, we're able to insert our clip from the left atrium into the left ventricle, grab both leaflets simultaneously or independently, depending what we need. Our grippers or frictional elements go down. We're able to raise one side, lower one side in case we don't have enough leaflet inside our clip. Once we do have enough, we will close the clip and assess to make sure we have a sufficient mitral regurgitation reduction. The goal is to keep both of those orifices open, only allowing blood flow to go one way, not back the other way. Once we enjoy it, we are able to remove the system and assess our final product. We're able to put more clips in if we need. Many times we're trying to do one clip and done because we do have multiple clips, but we're able to always go for a little bit better if we don't. That's the MitraClip system.
Outstanding. So David, kudos to the R&D team at Abbott. The engineering and innovation there is incredible. I'm curious, kind of take us back a little bit. When this device first came on market, how did you and your team, I think this is going to be really fascinating to people in this audience who are used to running the clinical trial side. So once this got FDA approval, or even before that, you guys started, but what was this like taking this out to your first customers? And then once they started to use the procedure and the device, how did you then continue to grow?
So we got FDA approval in 2013. I've been with the company 5 years. A little bit more than 5 years. So I came about 2 years after it got deployed. And when I started with the company, we had very, very few accounts. Our goal was always to, let's try to get in front of our customers as much as we can to review films. What's the next day? What's this? So once we got our data from our trial, we were like, look, we have this product. Great. Look, the trial was great. You don't have a lot of believers, but believing is seen. So we started doing procedures with the sites that did our research first. And from that, we were able to grow the therapy because we were getting these superior results. The MitraClip system was first approved for patients with degenerative mitral regurgitation. That's patients, and they had to be prohibitive risk for surgery. So these patients could not go to surgery. They were too sick, too many comorbidities, too frail. They wouldn't survive a surgery. So it was either surgery, which they weren't accepted for, or medications that they were already on, or nothing. So they were going to have to continue their life, continue everything the way it is. When MitraClip came out, these surgical patients, the non-surgical patients, had another option besides medication. So that's what we started doing. We started going out, going to these centers of excellence. And once one center received it, then they had that in their armamentarium. And it showed that, these referring physicians are wanting to send to these hospitals that have everything. They look down the street. All right, so if this hospital has everything, I need this therapy as well. I need this product line to compete in the market. And that's how MitraClip really did take off. Recently, about a year and a half, we had another indication for our sicker patients, functional MR patients, which was FDA approved. Since then, we have launched over 200 sites in the US. And for me, at least, it's been very difficult in Tennessee because Tennessee is pretty large. So I cover all of it. And many of the sites, I'm not able to drive 4 or 5 hours to review a film, only to drive back 4 or 5 hours to be in a procedure. We are in every single MitraClip procedure that is going on. So in order for us to do pre-procedure planning or actually see every single film and drive to every single account, it's impossible. So that's one thing with MitraClip, with Medidata. That's why we started going to this platform, is so that we could do this pre-procedure planning. The valve coordinators could upload, we could actually see everything prior to walking into the case.
Yeah, I think that's a game changer, right? And you guys become almost trusted advisors to the surgeons and the valve coordinators and the cath labs, is that they upload these images in advance to your team and you're able to review them or share them quickly. So if you're in Memphis and you have a case at University of Tennessee in Knoxville, which is 6 hours away, you're able to get back to them with data almost in real time. So that's definitely changed the game from driving. You're able to give them real-time insights. And when you are on site or in the OR, since you're using that metadata tool to review this in advance, you're more knowledgeable and probably have better interaction with the healthcare professionals, right?
So it's definitely a collaboration. This is the first time in my career that I can honestly say it's a collaboration that I'm doing with my physicians and my valve coordinators in order to make a decision. Hey, this is a good patient for this procedure. Hey, this is not a good person. Hey, I think we should go this direction. What do you guys think? It's definitely a partnership that you gain. A kind of a neat example actually happened this morning. I'm on my computer. I get a text message and an email at the same time from a valve coordinator. She says I live in Nashville. She's in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is about 2.5 hours away from me. She says, and there's a time change. She said, hey, we see this patient in clinic today. We didn't get the films until this morning. Can you look at them right now? So I was able to jump on the computer, see it, send it back to her, and she was able to see the patient with the physician and actually offer them this option just by doing that. So it's definitely a collaboration, definitely a team effort that we have. And us, as much as the physicians, we're all very passionate about the therapy and about these patients that we're trying to treat.
Right. And I really like that example, that use case. And I know, kind of sticking on Chattanooga, some of the sites down there, I think when you first launched the connected patient tool to obtain this data, not every site started right away. But when they saw
Mhm.
maybe some of the other sites in their region or state that were able to treat patients potentially faster because they were using electronic systems versus asking people to come on, that again somewhat changed the game. And so you started to see some of your other sites start to come on board. And so how was the rollout of the technology to your sites? Were they reluctant at first, or were they all on board because it makes their jobs easier?
So there were a few that were reluctant, mainly because of IT. And anytime you put a little bit
Sure.
more workload on someone, they don't really want to do that. They don't understand the value of it. I think the biggest game changer was we did have a few times that, they're like, hey, we're going to see this person in the office. Or tomorrow, can you drive here? and I'm about 5 or 6 hours away, and there was no way for me to be able to be there. So then they're postponing patient care, and that's when they're like, you know what, we have to find a better way. We need to be more efficient in our way. Let's work smarter, not harder. And that's what the big thing was then, in order to get the uptick with IT and everyone else aboard. Right now, all my accounts, they do have access to the metadata, and they all do upload their procedures prior to scheduling the procedure.
Perfect. I think we have time for one more question. And again, we love that you're able to join us here at Medidata Next. So our last question, because you are potentially speaking to a lot of R&D people in the room here, is how often, based on what you're seeing at sites and in the OR, and when patients are there and on the table, and you even see them maybe come in for their follow-up visits and how well this device is working, how often are you and your team kind of communicating back to the R&D team at Abbott Structural Heart corporate office on things you may be seeing in the floor with the device? I think that's a really interesting collaboration.
So we do work a lot with R&D, especially, it's sad, nobody likes, it's great to show praise, but usually when something bad happens is when you really want to communicate with your R&D. They really don't get enough love out of us. So we have procedures that we feel that, hey, look, we didn't get the result we really wanted, or the device didn't react the way we intended it or we thought it would. So many times we are saving that, uploading it, and giving them the case number so R&D could actually look at it and go a little bit more in depth. And they have an idea now. The first thing R&D will say, I said, hey, look, the device did this. First thing they say is, do you have images? And if I say no, they're like, well, there's nothing I could do. So we're really, really indebted to them. I mean, we're getting these images, we're sending it to them. And my R&D is in California. For me to actually grab a disc and send it, I can't tell you how many times I've sent a disc or received a CD that has gone through an X-ray that's completely blank. So it is so much easier. They could look at it really live the same day. They could look at it with the customer, with myself, and there isn't a lot of lag time. The best thing I do whenever the device isn't working well, I like to get back to the customer as soon as possible, get in front of them, and let's solve this issue. So that's where it's really changed. So we do collaborate a lot with R&D, and they actually can see the films that we have.
Perfect. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. For those in attendance, please be sure to ask your questions in the chat feature below. We'd love a kind of an interactive dialogue here, and enjoy the rest of the next event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody out there at Next. I hope you're enjoying day 3. I want to give a big thanks to Abbott Structural Heart and the entire team at Abbott for their insights. I think it was a really informative session and incredible watching that animation of their MitraClip device. Really breathtaking technology. So I did, unfortunately, the nature of the business is David couldn't join us today, so he actually has a case in the operating room, a live case going on right now in Chattanooga. And as much as we'd like to live stream that, David's unavailable to join us for this session. But luckily, we have Dan Braga he's from Medidata to join. So Dan is the Vice President of Product Management at Acorn and Medidata, and mostly has a deep experience with medical device companies and helping them define really a go-to-market plan and strategy around data acquisition and collaboration with sites as they look to roll out their devices. So welcome, Dan.
Hey, welcome, Troy. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So we've got some great questions coming in already. Please put any more questions you have in the Q&A box, and hopefully we've got some time to get to them. Also, be sure to head to the Innovation Lounge and stop by and maybe see a demo or request some additional information on our connected patient platform, and then also our imaging tools. But let's jump in because we've got some good ones coming in here. So Dan, what, in your experience, you've been working on this for a while, what do you see evolving in the next 5 years in terms of pre-surgical planning and really the evolution of medical device companies and how they work with hospitals?
Yeah, it's a great question, Troy. It's something that we're constantly thinking about and evaluating and keeping our finger on the pulse on every day. The easy answer would be to say anything in the AI or machine learning space, or even advances in telemedicine with live video and screen sharing and things like that. But where I see the biggest opportunity for advancement and what we're probably most focused on is in the areas of data and analytics. How can we look at data to help physicians make better decisions? How can we use data to identify patients that are appropriate for treatments faster? How can we kind of better understand the relationships between decisions physicians make and the outcomes of a procedure? So yeah, that's where I see the most advancements especially over the next 5 years, because this requires a lot of things to happen. You need systems to securely and compliantly access EMR data, EHR data, and other data platforms. You need imaging data, of course, and such as what David spoke about earlier, and even robotic surgery telemetry data. And then, getting access to that data, the spoke, if you will, with us serving as the hub, that's one piece, but kind of bringing it all together to tell a unique story and provide valuable insights in analytics. That's where our kind of sweet spot is, and that's what we're most focused on. So that's what I see really happening over the next 5 years is, better advance in analytics, better or more advancements in how this data is securely accessed and brought on to a single platform to provide these insights.
Cool. So I see another question coming in, and this is actually really timely for today's sort of theme at Next. So this one is, what kind of things can AI help a medical device company with? And I know David touched a little bit about how he uses the Medidata system to collaborate with surgeons and cath labs, but in terms of this question, how do you view AI helping medical device companies?
Yeah, Troy, when Medidata, when our physicians and when the industry really looks at AI, we really look at it in a few buckets. First is AI to be used to identify patients or identify, more anatomical abnormalities within a patient. Number two is really the classification. How do you best describe what you found? And then three, what I think most people think about is the more anatomical analysis, using the AI to make the actual measurements, whether it's in the cardiovascular space, the orthopedic space, the oncology space, wherever, AI actually getting fed a CT scan and spitting back out, the measurements and analysis that it made. And then fourthly is, AI to look at data collected post-review, so perhaps to find outliers, anomalies, errors. It's this patient's, aortic aneurysm was 5 centimeters, 2 weeks later was 5.1 centimeters, and all of a sudden it was 48 centimeters. And again, a gross example, but we know that's an anomaly. Could AI detect, errors in reporting? But with that being said, and I'll use aortic valve disease as an example, AI could, look at echoes and extract out important measurements, out of structured data that was captured, during that echo. And oftentimes that data is missed in a hospital. The hospital didn't have the appropriate, process or, kind of workflow and treatment kind of plan to handle patients that had such, results. AI could then appropriately classify the aortic valve disease it found and kick off the correct workflows, for that particular patient in that hospital, or even if it's at a community hospital, take the results of that and refer that patient to a larger institution, for treatment. So there's a lot of other examples, but they generally fall in one of those four buckets. And again, everyone tends to focus on AI and making measurements and doing analysis. I think the earlier wins will be in things like, work list prioritization, anomaly detection, data quality reviews, and more like that.
Awesome. I see a few more questions coming in, but I know we're up on our time. So thank you for kind of a really different look at some of the places Medidata plays in. I know we talked a lot about cardiovascular here today with David and yourself, Dan, but I know Medidata has a deep experience in helping these devices come to market with spine and orthopedics and even oncology with things like tumor boards and stroke assessment. So it's a really interesting space that we play in here on the Acorn team. So I want to thank everybody for joining this session. Be sure to, again, stop by the innovation booth and enjoy the day 3 here of Next. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.